Okay, so a lot has happened in the last few hours, especially regarding Lionel Messi. Now, obviously, it's the big news story at the moment in sport is that he's handed in his transfer request to Barcelona, and people on Messi's side of things want to see him leave on a free transfer. Now, they're claiming that at the end of this season, there was a clause in his contract stating he could leave on a free. What Barcelona are claiming is that that clause expired in June and that they are expecting, if he is to leave, a transfer fee of up to 700 million euros for a transfer fee. Yes, I literally just went to the barber shop, had all my hair shaved off. I've been growing it for a year, it had to go. Had a beard trim as well. My beard was out here. That all had to go. I've had a fair bit of abuse at work from me mullet and me beard, so it's all gone. As you can see, it's all nice and grade one. Back on the Messi side of things. So we're going to start with this, and then we'll discuss other things like Jimmy Anderson taking 600 Test wickets, the first seam bowler to do so, and I believe he will take even more before the Test series against Pakistan is done. He'll be in the 620, 630s by the end of the series. On the Messi situation, there are three options. Barcelona can concede that there is the clause in his contract and can leave on a free, and therefore he can go to Manchester City or Rosario or PSG or whatever club can fulfil his wage demands. Uh, or they try and force through a transfer of a stupid amount of money for a player in his mid 30s, or they go through a Bosman ruling. Now, how does someone even exchange 700 million euros with someone else? Cash app. Normally, transfers of larger scale are done by cash installments, installed payments over a period of time. I mean, Neymar's transfer is still being paid off by PSG to Barcelona, for example, and there's a payment system. So it's sort of like a mortgage payment. You're paying over a period of time before the transfer is fully complete. And sometimes the player moves on from that club to another club, and there's add-on clauses, which we saw with so many players where there's add-on clauses to a previous club as well. And that's causing issues within the transfer market. Now, I can't see any club at this current time, with the current ongoing crisis, with no fans allowed in stadiums, with clubs losing money, being willing to part with that much cash. I cannot see it being acceptable. Fans, I don't think, will be enamoured with that line of thinking by teams. I don't think it's justifiable. And although Barcelona are obviously cash strapped and they would love 700 million euros, I can't see them getting that amount of money for a player who's declining slowly. I mean, he's still a superstar. He's still one of the world's best players, but he's not the player he was 5 years ago. He has been linked with Man City in the past. As soon as Guardiola uh, took over at Man City, he was linked with a move to the Etihad. Yeah, there's always been rumours with him linking up with Guardiola again. He has said in statements in the past that he either places his entire career at Barcelona or he goes back to Rosario in Argentina. Now, whether there's another clause in his contract allowing him to do that, we'll wait and see. He's always been very open to going back to Rosario in Argentina, where he started as a youth player before moving over to Spain in his teenage years. But yes, the guy did first report Neymar to PSG is also reporting Messi's going to Man City. Now, the interesting thing is the debate over the contract clause. There are three options. They can allow him to leave on a free, which I think is beneficial to all parties. They can try and force through a transfer of a stupid amount of money that, if Man City were to part with that, that's another flagrant breach of financial fair play, considering that football finances, it's been proven that having fans in the stadium is more important than the clubs were claiming several seasons ago when they kept jacking up the ticket price. Or there's a Bosman ruling, and a Bosman ruling can be a long, protracted affair that really damages both parties. It becomes messy, excuse the pun. But I think a Bosman ruling suits no one, not even a prospective club wanting to sign him for a season or a couple of seasons, because it delays his start date with the club. We have a very short turnaround between the end of this season, as of Sunday, and the official start of the 12th of September. So there's a shortened transfer window, a very shortened pre-season, so fitness and getting used to new teammates. This story is going to continue to develop. But it's an ongoing, protracted saga that could damage the image of primarily Barcelona. Barcelona come out as the losers here because Messi's clearly very unhappy at the club. Ronald Koeman, obviously, his first meeting as manager was with Messi. He's also, I think, had meetings with Suarez and Piqué, who also are very keen to leave the Nou Camp. I say Bernabeu, man, the Nou Camp. There's clearly player unrest within the dressing room. And there's clearly what's been said by Valverde, the club president, is there's going to have to be structural changes to the club going forward. And when Piqué came out and said if they change the club structures too much, I'm out, I'm leaving, it shows there is player unrest. This is a team that's been driven by ego power in the dressing room for too long. The amount of managers they've gone through over a successive decades, it's not just Guardiola or anything like that. Barcelona, they don't give managers time. Same with Real Madrid as well. They don't give managers time. The reason why Atletico Madrid are so consistent is they've given Simeone a lot of time. He's been there a long time. Every other major Spanish club goes through managers like unbelievable. I think this is the problem with not just football, but a lot of sport is coaches and managers aren't given the time necessary to implement tactics, policies, grow a squad. It's always results driven, as in you have to win now, you have to win now, you have to win now. And look at the Brisbane Broncos in Australia, and we'll get to that in a minute. They signed Anthony Seibold to a 5-year deal. He's done within 2. The payout he's going to get is looking like around 1.6 million Australian dollars, which is about 1.1, 1.2 million pounds, 2 million US dollars for failure. So this is a problem. When you keep sacking managers and coaches, you have to pay them out for a termination of contract. You have to pay them compensation. And that gets expensive. And I think this is where there's too much money in football. There's too much money in professional sport. And it is becoming problematic where it's clearly unsustainable. Barcelona are finding that out. They are hemorrhaging money. If Manchester United, one of the better financially run clubs off the field, financially they are a powerhouse as well, are losing 5 million a day without fans in attendance, that tells you that things aren't good with the TV deal. It isn't structured right. There is issues with the transfer market. There are issues with overpaying players, and it's an ongoing concern. Football as a sport needs to change how it's run massively. It's in massive need of reform on not just a national level in various clubs, but on an international transcontinental policy as well. Yes, I do have a decent hairline, although I'm starting to thin a little bit on top. It has been noted. Just here, got a bit of a widow's peak for me, but my mullet got a bit long and it had to go. it got messy, and my work colleagues would give me a fair bit of abuse. But I've got 2 days holiday, so I thought I'll surprise them on Friday when I go back and go, "Hi guys, I have no hair." On the where does Messi end up? Man City are very likely because of the Guardiola Messi connection. But I fear Messi's coming to the Premier League too late. There were opportunities in previous seasons that they could have signed him and had negotiations. And since Guardiola's been at City, those rumours have been there. I think they're signing it. If they are going to sign him, they're signing him well below the peak of his powers, and we're not going to get the best Messi in the Premier League. I have heard rumours about Luka Doncic being an interesting athlete, and he could set the North American leagues alight. We'll have to see how he plays out. But many a great European athlete has gone over. You look at the NHL; it's stacked full of Europeans, and some of these guys are world class. So, Major League Rugby is now emerging as a force, and when that restarts, it'll be interesting to see how they play. And with this extended lockdown, again, lots of European rugby players going over there. So he won't be the first European to go over to the US or Canada to ply his trade. He won't be the last, but it is interesting. Who would want to invest in sport right now? Very risky. Well, look at the Australian and the Kiwi models. They got fans back in the stadiums earlier. They secured good TV deals that are pretty much the same as what they are with full fan attendance. They're not altering the salary cap in the NRL, the AFL. So if you look at the Australian model, they've done exceptionally well at restarting sport earlier, getting matches played, coming to agreements with state and regional governments to allow sport to return. They've got fans back in stadiums at a limited capacity. They're well ahead of Europe and North America by far. So if you want to invest in sport, I would. If you want to invest in sport, invest in Australian sport. They seem to have got the restart right. It is still risky. We have seen the collapse of TV deals. We have seen issues, especially in football and rugby union, over in Europe with massive financial losses because they were signing players to unsustainable contracts that could only be sustained by TV money. It just shows how important fans are to the health and success of sport. Plain and simple. It shows how important fan involvement, fans going to games, buying merchandise, buying season tickets are to the health of the sport. It would take something special for a European athlete to outdo Ovechkin's impact in the American leagues. Yes, Ovechkin for his goal scoring in the NHL is something unbelievable, but he's only won one Stanley Cup. There are other European hockey players who have won far more in the team side of things in the game. But on an individual level, he is possibly the best. I think the best possibly European ever to ply his trade in North America. You could say David Beckham with the MLS, rebuilding that league and propelling it forward for an impact, and the fact he's starting up his own team. Does the UK ice hockey have a season next year? EIHL level, too many imports and rink issues at all levels. Yes, British ice hockey is in a precarious position. We know, I've got a friend, my work colleague Dave, plays for a rec team, and they've been constantly delayed in their return to training and rink availability. We've lost the Bracknell ice rink. It looks like permanently. It could be a long-term temporary thing. Basingstoke, for instance, in a mess. Other rink operators that aren't council are having problems. Everyone Active runs a lot of the facilities in Berkshire. The Slough rink was refurbed recently, and that's where the Bees are now playing. But Everyone Active is receiving bailouts from local councils to fulfil its obligations under the contract it has signed with all the various local councils in this part of the UK. So I don't know. Do we have a season next year? Well, if we're going by government guidelines, fans will be allowed back in Scotland provisionally on, I think, the 14th of September. Now, 3 EIHL teams in Scotland, and the rest of the UK by the 1st of October. So it will be interesting to see what comes of these discussions and if they are set in stone. Yes, the import side of things, that's not necessarily an issue as long as the visa situation with North Americans, which we've seen with the Toronto Wolfpack was a disaster, is properly organised, and that the European imports, depending on what happens with the EU negotiations, which appear to be going nowhere, there is a concern, yes, we may have a shortage of players. Europe's next top footballing super team, I don't know, is the plain simple answer. This season was heavily delayed, obviously, and disrupted. I don't know what you would class as a super team. I think this coming season is going to be really peculiar. We're not going to have a winter break for the main European leagues. The transfer window has been shortened and it's confusing. The pre-seasons doesn't really exist. You've got 3 weeks. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Well, what would it take for British ice hockey players to get to the NHL? Well, Liam Kirk's been drafted, so that's a starting point. And until this shutdown and until this coronavirus pandemic, British ice hockey was growing massively. So I don't know what it would take to get more British ice hockey players into the NHL draft or considered for the NHL to be draft eligible. The British leagues have improved massively. The player depth has improved massively. The growth of the sport has improved massively, but it's still a very expensive sport in which to put your kids through. If you are a parent, you have to make a lot of sacrifices. Could the NHL, as the Super League in the world, do more to invest in European leagues? Because bearing in mind, they take the best European talent. Let's not kid ourselves. The NHL does take the best European talent out of Europe into North America. It's interesting. The Swedish and the Finnish setups are quite strong. The Danish have got a good league. The German league's pretty solid. The French league is improving. The Czech and Slovak leagues are pretty good. It's the second most popular sport in Europe as a whole. How do Nordic players get drafted then? It's because the SHL, the Swedish league, is so good. They have a very, very good system. But they've been producing quality players for 40, 50 years. And the NHL has noted that. And when it was the WHA, there was a massive Swedish European invasion, as they called it. And European players have been going over to play in the NHL since the 70s en masse. So, and the Russian setup, I mean, the Soviet government put a lot of money into their hockey program, and that's still paying off today. Is the KHL becoming stronger? Again, we don't know what next season is going to look like across the board in a whole host of sports. You have to, but I always say this: since the NRL has restarted, I've pretty much watched every game over the weekends because I have the Watch NRL subscription. So I've been able to watch a lot of rugby league in Australia. They got their restart right. The AFL got their restart sort of right, although the NRL won the battle there and getting restarted first by putting a concrete date in and forcing it through and having the agreements with the state governments, Queensland, New South Wales, and the territory government in Canberra. The Melbourne Storm, there's still issues in the state of Victoria, in Australia, with a higher infection rate and a local lockdown in place. So Melbourne Storm have to play outside of Melbourne. But I'm saying that the agreement they came with the New Zealand Warriors to keep them playing has kept the integrity of the competition. Players and coaches who breach the lockdown bubbles, as they're called, are getting heavily fined and punished. So the NRL and the AFL have done things right. There have been a few hurdles in the way, but in all told, it's not the end of the world. The Harry Maguire situation is another high-paid, high-profile sports star being an absolute idiot. I think since he's gone to Man United, his career hasn't really kicked on. He was doing quite well at Leicester. Leicester looked closer to win the Premier League than Man United, in my opinion, with the systems they had in place and the way the team performs as a unit and the culture of that club. Manchester, he's gone an holiday to Greece at a time which, yes, it's a very trying time for everything, but he's got involved in a drunken brawl at a bar or a club. We don't know the full ins and outs of it, but he's in a fair bit of trouble. Not a good look for a club in Man United that have had so much negative press in recent seasons, and it's not a good look when he's the club captain. So my thoughts on it is, yes, sports stars are human beings, but a lot of the time they live in this bubble where they don't really live in the real world. But we saw this with the whole Ben Stokes thing. It really pisses me off that these sports stars believe they are entitled to get away with stuff. It's a privilege, not a right, to be a professional athlete, and a lot of these professional sports stars don't know what they're doing. Really, they are completely out of touch. On the Glasgow Clan side of things, it is worrying if they have basically said that they won't be playing this year. Again, arena issues are a massive problem. And that is worrying for the integrity of the league because, the John Knight Group decided to pull the plug on the Bracknell Ice Rink. It's a mess. I think this is the problem with having I wouldn't call ice hockey a minority sport, but it's a niche sport, and a lot of the facilities aren't owned by local councils. They are run by private companies, either on behalf of a council or for profit. And what we're seeing is that shouldn't be the case. But yeah, the EIHL have got to have some conversations, not just with the Clan, but with every team, and British Ice Hockey as the overriding. We go from one season to another. Every season with British Ice Hockey, going from one crisis to the next and not knowing if this team is going out of business, this rink's going to be suitable to use. Like Basingstoke's been an ongoing concern for several years now. The Bracknell rink, that was a mess that could be handled completely differently. But that's a long period of lack of investment in a facility by a private company, when really it should be run by the council with the private company as the operator. That's my view on things. It's the situation when you have facilities used by the public that are used for recreational, leisure, and sport. it's a mess. And if the EIHL, we could lurch from one crisis to the next, and we could lose our top flight league, and we could lose a lot of teams in the lower levels, and the growth of the sport is had a massive handbrake put on it. I haven't really been following all the ins and outs. I mean, I've been following the Bracknell situation until I recently moved just down the road, but it seems that there's an issue with who owns the facilities, and unfortunately, the growth of the sport could be killed like that. Massive growth of the sport over the last decade could be killed off like that, and we just don't know what's going to happen. I think British ice hockey as a whole, they need to talk to all the teams at professional and semi-pro level, and work out a restructuring and a survival plan going forward, because the sport could be killed off within weeks unless some kind of thought out process is put in place. There have been grants given out to sustain teams at the various levels from UK sport, but that can only survive so long. And with no definite restart date and fans not being allowed back in, this is a sport that is, again, fans and attendance keeps it going. The TV deal isn't great. The media partners are mostly local radio stations, local websites, local newspapers. So they don't get enough press coverage, and it's not really getting the coverage it should get on the national scale, because football, for some reason, has been driving the conversation for a long time. Rugby union driving the conversation for a long time. Cricket, to a point, the 100 format, which no one wants, they're still trying to forge ahead, even though it's going to make a loss anyway. And at this time, loss making is not a good idea. So we just don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, there are concerns up and down the land that we're going to have a massive restructuring of the sport. So we don't know what the situation is going to look like if and when a season can restart, and in what state it's going to look like. We just don't know, and that's a massive problem. With no certainty about anything, that causes more harm than at least having a set restart date, a set pre-season. With uncertainty, it causes more problems. And I don't know enough about the situation with the various teams up and down the land. I really don't. But the situation doesn't look good. I mean, Leeds have literally just started up as a team, and this is their second pre-season, and they could be going out of business within a year. That is ridiculous. Considering that the rink has just been built, that is absolutely ridiculous. I think the problem is we've had a poor lack of leadership for a very long time when it comes to regulating and growing the game in this country. There's been a real, I wouldn't say void, but weak leadership for a long period of time. There's been weak administration, and the sport does risk completely folding. And thousands of fans who've invested a lot of money and a lot of players have a job. We'll have to see what happens. Ice hockey is not the only sport struggling. I mean, if you look at rugby league, they had to get a loan from the government very early on. They negotiated the loan, but then you look at it, and you look at what the TV deal's worth to the Super League. Then you go over to Australia and look how much their TV deal's worth for the NRL, and you realise where the money's now at, and that wasn't always the case. And again, that's a problem with the administration side and how they grow the game. They are obsessed with the north of England's rugby league. They do not want to look where the money is, which is south of England and the Midlands. They are obsessed with the M62 corridor, and at the end of the day, that's what's killing the sport slowly. Is the lack of investment. Very few clubs make a profit. And those clubs that are struggling to break even, they're reliant on wealthy owners backing them up, and that can only go on so long with the current crisis financially that we're seeing. You look at the NRL, they've renegotiated the TV deal. It's worth a lot of money. The salary cap staying the same. Players don't have to take a pay cut. They've got fans back in the stadiums already. They've nearly completed a shortened season, mind you, whereas the Super League, the Toronto Wolfpack aren't resuming. Challenge Cups had to be restructured because teams have pulled out, and the whole situation in the Super League is a mess. And the Championship, there's no games resuming. League One, no games resuming. The future of the sport is at risk. You look at Rugby Union, that's only just restarted. It's taken them that long to restart the season. It's mental. Football, was always put first. But the way they handled football wasn't great. The lower leagues got screwed. We could see up to 60 football clubs go out of business. I think professional sport is really in a mess right now, completely and utterly, and we don't know what the future holds, basically. A lot of money's been lost by a lot of professional sports teams, and you look at the TV deals and it shows how much overspend and reckless financial management has been in place for so long, because the TV money. Teams up and down in professional sport across the country have been recklessly financially managed for a very long time, and it's coming home to roost. Because instead of having fans involved in boards and fans involved in ownership, it's private owners, and they can switch off the tap when they want. And we will get to Newcastle United and the mess that was their takeover, which I've discussed to death. There's not really much more to say about Newcastle United apart from Mike Ashley has to sell. The Premier League dragged their feet over the takeover deal. They then blocked the takeover deal, and Newcastle United are left in limbo, which means Steve Bruce, whatever you think of him, is left in limbo. And he's in the same position that Rafa Benitez was. This has been a 4-year saga that should not have taken 4 years. This should have been done and dusted with 2017, but the Premier League have really got some questions to answer. Ooh, I think the neighbours had a tree cut down. But the Premier League have some questions to answer, and they will continue to have questions to answer. Because there's clearly a lack of transparency when it comes to football club ownership in this country. I mean, every sport's taken a hit. Every sport has taken a hit globally. The CFL not restarting this season. Well, you say that, but I think that's then implying that there's a bias. If it is proven that there is a bias, then the integrity of the entire league is in question. Plain and simple. If it is implied or it comes out that there is a bias, and had it been Man United, I mean, the Man United takeover, there's question marks about that because it's basically funded on the Glazers' debt, which they are borrowing money off other people. So at some point, with Man United losing money every week because of no fans in attendance, so they're pre-season, they can't go abroad for pre-season tours, which make them a lot of revenue. Question marks have always been asked about the Man United takeover by the Glazers and the fact that they financed it via borrowing money, not with their own cash. Liverpool have had some dodgy takeovers in the past. Hicks and Gillette, and the transfer to the current ownership, that was a mess. Randy Lerner with Aston Villa. If there is a bias there, and it is intentional, and then questions will be asked of the integrity of the organisation. And fans across the board aren't happy with a lot of things with football. We are seeing a call for more free-to-air television. There are still calls to bring back the Champions League and Europa League to free-to-air coverage shared with satellite broadcasters. And that worked well until BT Sport took the rights, and a lot of fans aren't happy with that. It's a difficult one. But I always refer back to the NRL because they have a shared rights between Channel 9 and Foxtel, and it works very well. So if you don't want to pay for Foxtel, you may watch less games, but you're still watching big matches on free-to-air TV. So it's balancing it up. And that was part of the league's agreement. Every collective bargaining agreement, there has to be free-to-air coverage of percentage of games. But if it is proven that there was clearly bias in their decision making, or they dealt with the situation differently because of the club in question, that is wrong. There was a lot of question marks about the Newcastle takeover deal that weren't fully answered, and there wasn't clearly a transparency, which I think people are asking for. You look at football ownership, you look at Macclesfield, they're in a mess. Bury that how that was allowed to happen. The EFL and the FA questions need to be asked of them. The Bolton Wanderers situation, Wigan Athletic, that's another one. It's not that long ago Wigan were lifting the FA Cup. You look at some of the ownership, and there are some serious questions to answer. And the footballing authority, the governing bodies, are being very evasive and not being fully transparent in the meetings that they've had, allowing these clubs to be purchased by people who clearly are not fit to own the club. And the lack of fan involvement is troubling in this country. It's really troubling for me. You look at other sports and other leagues around the world, there's a lot more fan involvement. And I will go back to the NRL and the AFL memberships. You can be a club member and therefore have a vote on the running of the club. And who's put in as chairman, who's put in as CEO, who's put in as finance director. You can vote on these things. And there's more say for fans on how their teams are run. Whereas over here, it's an owner or an ownership group, and the money men or women are the ones who say what goes at the club. Fans have very little involvement about how their teams are run, apart from Exeter City, which is a weird thing. But there isn't a lot of fan involvement in the sense of the day-to-day running, their concerns put forward. It's troubling. I think we need to look at the system of how clubs are run and financed and governed, and we have to look at the governing bodies. We have to look at the structures in place, because what has come out of this coronavirus pandemic is a clear financial irresponsibility and bad financial management across the board, which shouldn't be the case. I wouldn't say promotion relegation is a problem, but what we have seen is that I wouldn't say promotion relegation is a problem, but it's how the system is governed, where you are rewarding failure by constantly parachute payment of money. That system needs to change. I'm not against promotion relegation as long as it is done properly. Unfortunately, there is too much money in the sport, and that's where there's too much capital. There is too much money. There's not enough fan involvement with how teams are run. And that's my personal opinion on sports governance in the UK. We can also have the same argument about is sports governance in Australia, New Zealand, North America, South Africa with the sport not resuming, whereas the rest of Super Rugby has sport across Europe, South America with their style of sports ownership. There's always pros and cons with any system. The problem is in the UK, at least, there has been massive financial mismanagement and reckless overspending. It doesn't matter what league you're in or what sport you're in. There's clearly been poor management of facilities. So the Ricoh Arena in Coventry, for example, what's happening with a variety of ice rinks and ice arenas around the UK. Football, the Bury situation, this time last year, we were talking about Bury going out of business. We did not know that this pandemic was going to be a thing. That was in good times. And I say that, this is before the crisis. Bury going out of business was a sign that things were going wrong. Macclesfield have got through most of the season with a cloud over them with financial mismanagement. Things were going wrong. Then the shutdown came along and it exposed 60 clubs from the Premier League to League Two that could go out of business because of literally poor management financially. The weight of cash at the top not being properly distributed as it used to be pre-92. Shocking TV deal. Yeah, there is a lot of politics, and you could go back to the Newcastle United takeover. I think the promotion relegation system works. It does, in principle. Practicalities of it and the implementation have been skewed very badly. And there is a reward for failure. I don't like that. You should not be rewarded for failing. To get these parachute payments over a successive period of time is rewarding failure. But the problem is there's too much money in the sport now. If you had less money floating around and a wage, this is where we need salary caps and spending caps, because clearly, if Messi was to go to Man City and Barcelona were asked for a transfer fee, would that be acceptable? The amount of money Barcelona are asking for to cover their own financial mismanagement over decades. This is the thing. Barcelona are asking for a transfer fee to cover their own financial mismanagement of that club, and that is with fan involvement. Work that one out. They've massively overspent on contracts. They're overpaying players through the roof. No one is worth 700 million euros. Okay, Neymar's transfer to PSG was repugnant in the amount of money. Mbappe's transfer, vile amount of money. Now their sting is unjustifiable. I cannot see how Man City or Rosario, that's more than the value of the club. You see where I'm getting at? Rosario, that is more than the value of the club. And if Man City were to sign him for that kind of money, then that's two fingers to financial fair play going, we're going to do it anyway. You can't punish us. We've already won our appeal. And it's this is where there's too much money in football. Other sports are suffering as a result. The TV deal is heavily skewed. And then the TV companies throw their toys out the pram demanding money back, but then they lose subscribers in the process. And not all fans are happy with the return either and how it's been managed. But because fans don't really have much input in how sport is governed, that leads to a breakdown in trust. And there's clearly, I mean, we saw during the early stages of the lockdown, the PFA, the footballers, trade union, saying do not take pay cuts or wage deferrals. Yet certain squads went, we're going to do it. They were told and advised by the PFA not to take wage cuts or deferrals. Individual playing squads and clubs came together, regardless of having meetings with the PFA, the FA, the EFL, the Premier League, went, we're going to do it anyway. We're not going to listen to these organisations. We're going to come to an agreement, like adults. I would say I think some sports are better run than others. But what we have seen, unfortunately, is what has been exposed as bad governance over a lengthy period of time. That has been exposed by this crisis. Jimmy Anderson, 600 test wickets. Oh, wow. I haven't really been following the test series, but to hit 600 test wickets as a fast bowler, never been done before. That means I think there's only 3 bowlers above him or 4 bowlers above him now in the wicket standings. And they're all spinners. There's no way he's catching Muralitharan or Shane Warne, but Kumble is catchable. I don't think he's got much miles left in the tank. I will be honest on that. I don't think he plays on much longer, but we could see about 620, 630 wickets. I think that is very attainable for him. He's 37. He's 37. I watched his first Test match at Lords in 2003 against Zimbabwe in his first Test wickets. If he has a solid spell at some point in the remainder of the Test series, he could get 10 wickets in a Test match. He could hit 620, 630 Test wickets before he's done. It is entirely feasible that he could hit that, barring injury. But he's already hit 600. I think 650 would be too far for him as a target, although it's doable. He could have just one of those Test matches where he's on fire and everything's paying off and every line and length's perfect. And there's someone chopping down a tree. There's a tree surgeon at work. I've got to have the back door open outside my flat because it's just too hot in here. Otherwise, I'll be melting even with a haircut. I think Jimmy Anderson, yes, he can hit 620. I think that's attainable. I think 650 is asking too much of his body at this time, unless he has like a crazy spell of bowling in a Test match and he skittles like a fifer. I don't think he has enough left in the tank to get too many more. But anything's doable. As we've seen in sport over the last year, it's been crazy and unpredictable. And the fact we've got any sport at all is something that we should savour. You can again debate the TV deal that's been signed and the ECB's failings as an organisation and their insistence on the 100 format that they have admitted is going to lose money. And if you're making a loss now, imagine making when they were planning to make a loss in the first year anyway. That's not a good business model. So my old flat. I moved out of my old flat in March. Moved back home for 5 months and found my new apartment 2 weeks ago. So I've been living here 2 weeks on Saturday. So a week and a half I've been living here. Just getting used to the place. It's still a mess. I mean, I've still got boxes of stuff. But my old flat, I had issues with a variety of issues of the situation, which I don't want to get into. But I think it's safe to say it was a nightmare. There was all sorts of problems with damp, mold, the heating failure, sewage. So raw sewage coming out my sink on the 3rd floor. Yeah, the drainage completely collapsed outside. Issues with just the whole thing. It was just a mess. And I was glad to get out of there. That was 6 months of my life I want back. But no, I've been living here now for a couple of weeks. I'm still waiting for some furniture to turn up. It's a lot smaller than the old flat, I will admit. But it's more comfortable. I don't have to struggle upstairs. I mean, my bike parked out the back. Taplow is quite a nice area if you have like £1 million to buy a house. If you're renting a flat there, you're going to be living in squalor. That's pretty much. I'm 30. I'm 30. I actually looked. I think I looked younger with my long hair. I look older with the short hair. But the barber did a good job. He literally shaved it all off in one, which is nice, not be sweating ball sacks. But yeah, I'm starting to thin a little bit on top. It had to go. It got long. But no, harking back to, because I keep harking back to the NRL. The Brisbane Broncos situations, if you follow the NRL, the Brisbane Broncos situation has got several tangents going on. Because the NRL operates with a salary cap, a lot of players supplement their income with sponsorship deals, so third-party payments, which means they can supplement their income and it has to be declared to the league. Now, Tavita Pangai Jr. is a player who's breached lockdown protocols, which were put in place to allow the sport to come back to play at the end of May. He has been indefinitely suspended by the league. He has a meeting with the team board's hierarchy to argue his case against his contract termination. And he's alleging, and those around him, his advisor, are alleging that he's owed a third-party payment, which is an external sponsor, which has to be declared. It is transpiring that this may not have been declared to the league's head office, which will then lead Brisbane into further problems. Not only have they got to find a new head coach for next season, and not only have they got to pay out Anthony Seibold about $1.6 million Australian dollars in a severance payment, they may be docked points and heavily fined for breaching the salary cap. And if it transpires that they have misled the NRL Integrity Unit, then questions will be asked about how third-party payments are governed and why they didn't declare. So that's an interesting one. So when you do have a salary cap system in place, players supplement their income because they will possibly earn less in real terms with sponsorship deals. And a lot of professional athletes, you've seen on TV adverts and billboards and adverts online where they are endorsing a product, be it, Gillette have got lots of advertising arrangements with sports stars, Pepsi, Lionel Messi and others, and Paul Pogba. And so they sign these deals and they have to declare these earnings. If you're playing in a system without a salary cap, it doesn't matter. If you're playing in a salary cap system, you have to declare that you have an agreement with said commercial company to endorse a product as part of your earnings. And it appears that Brisbane may not have done that. So there's a lot of going on in the Broncos system. So if you are playing in a league with a salary cap, that's something to be aware of. And it's something that it appears that Brisbane haven't been following the rules. Schweppes Lemonade, pretty good sponsor. See, if I was to be sponsored by these guys and I was an athlete, so let's say I'm sponsored by Schweppes, I would have to, register that deal with the league's head office saying that I'm receiving X amount per annum in being sponsored by the manufacturers of this product on top of my salary. They can go, yep, we accept that. That's signed off. That's allowed. If, however, I'm waiting on getting paid by Schweppes, for example, and I don't declare it, it's a way to get around the salary cap system, which is there in place to make sure that every team has a fighting chance to sign the same amount of players on the same salaries, so they can all have competitive rosters, so they can all basically make the league more competitive. And there are arguments for and against the salary cap system. And there's a hard cap system and a soft cap system, and then there's a flexi cap system. So there's various salary cap systems in place. And this is an argument being put forward by lower league footballers that we need a salary cap. And these same pitfalls are going to be coming along. And because European football has never had a salary cap system in place, they're going to learn on the hop. And this is where cap breaches happen, is the administrators of the sport are inexperienced in implementing it or haven't had to come across these hurdles before, and teams will find a way to fiddle the system to gain an advantage so they can sign that high profile player. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. Oh, I'm not being paid by Schweppes at all, but I use it as an example. If I was, I'm not, but if I was, or someone who manufactures Schweppes saw this video and said, "Oh, this guy likes our product," and contacted me, that's different. But if hypothetically I was an athlete, and I was playing in a league or a sport that was governed by a salary cap system, I would have to state how much Schweppes were paying me, declare it to the league head office, and they could go, "We accept this deal. This is acceptable. You have declared it. You've been transparent. This is ticked off." Or, "Unfortunately, that means you're over the cap, or whatever reason, we can't accept that sponsorship deal. Um, it can't be allowed." And then a solution has to be found. Now, in the Brisbane situation, what appears to be the case is Tavita Pangai Jr., regardless of his suspension and all that, has alleged that he's owed a third party payment that was organised by Brisbane. So Brisbane can get sponsors on board as well. He's alleged that he's owed payments by this sponsor because it brings money into the team and it can help the team finance itself. Brisbane are saying, well, we've declared all third party payments to the league unit, the integrity unit. Other members of the organisation say, what third party payment? What company? And they're actually asking questions. And now, because members of the club's backroom staff are going, hang on a second, what third party payment? What sponsor is he owed money by? Because we're looking at all the third party agreements that are on the books. He doesn't have one with this company. It doesn't exist. And now it's gone to the integrity unit, and that's where questions have been asked. And if Brisbane are found guilty, you have to look at previous salary cap breaches and previous situations within the game. And other clubs will be going, well, we were punished thusly for salary cap breaches. What are you going to do about Brisbane? This is the flagship club of the sport. This is the wealthiest club in rugby league. What are you going to do to them? They are shown to show favouritism to the Broncos. That's not going to go down well. And we'll have to see what happens and what comes out of it. But now that Todd Greenberg is gone, the former CEO, who was hopeless, by the way, and has been replaced by basically Peter V'landys is running the show with an iron fist, I can see a strict punishment coming down. But it basically, think of it like financial fair play as well. You have to, the sponsorship deals have to be declared and transparent. So when PSG, AC Milan, and Man City were dragged before UEFA's ethics committee over financial fair play, they all appealed, by the way, and all won their appeals and had their punishments reduced. But it's the same principle. You have to declare these things. You have to be transparent. And here's that Brisbane maybe not being so good in their transparency, which then leads to further issues down the line over the integrity of the game, which is a problem, big problem. But the Brisbane Broncos disaster that this season has been highly entertaining for sports fans. It's been highly entertaining. It makes good TV. They probably will make a documentary about it, or a film, or a TV series. It's really fun to watch. I would love to be a fly on the wall in that dressing room or in that boardroom going, this is a car crash. This is entertaining. At the same time, a club of that stature going through the mess they're going through is just utterly unbelievable. This is a team that's won 6 premierships in 32 years, but hasn't been to the grand final since 2015. It's 5 years without success, and hasn't won since 2006. So this has been their least successful period in existence. This last 14 years has been a drought, basically. And questions are being asked about a whole host of things. But yes, so I use the Schweppes thing as an example about third-party payments and sponsorship deals. Not that I am sponsored. If, however, Schweppes would like to sponsor me, I like your lemonade. It's very nice. Jokes aside, that's third-party payments in a brief overview. I mean, it's far more complex than that, and it goes well above my knowledge of business studies and contract law. But principle is the club or the player can sign a sponsorship deal. They then go to the league head office and say that we have this sponsorship deal, this third-party payment. They can be transparent. The league signs off it generally, and all is well. What the Pangai is alleging is that he hasn't been paid payments owed to him. This is going on the backdrop of his indefinite suspension and his contract basically going to go through the shredder and a whole host of other issues. So Brisbane are not only having issues finding a new coach, and they've had to sack a coach, and they've got to pay him out. The team have won 3 games all season. They're second bottom in the league. They're facing a wooden spoon, which has never happened before. Things are getting worse before they get better. There's a lack of confidence, lack of morale. They can't buy a win. They've got the worst defence in the league. There's issues in the boardroom. There's issues with player discipline, which half the squad have been involved in lockdown breaches. 2 board members have been caught lockdown breaching the bubble as well. So the whole thing is a car crash broadcast, not only across Australia, but across the world. In a sport that needs to grow outside of its traditional area to compete with other sports to make money. And yeah, it's a bit of a car crash. Bit of a car crash is an understatement. It's a disaster that other teams that have been badly run over the years are going, we thought we were bad. What's going on up here? And there's question marks over like, who's going to replace Anthony Seibold, and can I be a mod? I don't like people asking to be moderators. I have a rule: if you're regularly in live streams and you regularly, have good debate, then eventually you do become a moderator. I choose who the moderators are. So if people ask me mods, they get bumped down the list, I'm afraid. There are a lot of people, obviously, in the chat today who are regularly leave comments on the channel, regularly leave feedback on the channel, regularly contribute to live stream. At the end of the day, I normally choose subscribers and viewers who are older to be moderators as well. There are very few moderators on the channel, but they're normally long-term subscribers and they're normally my age or older. It just keeps the chat clean. It keeps it a more level-headed thing, because I don't want people just to start arbitrarily asking, because it gets annoying. It's just a rule I have. I've learned from other channels as well who I allow to be moderators. So it's just a rule that I put in place on the channel. There's a couple of guys on the channel who regularly are on every live stream. They can be. They get frustrated if they miss one. The only reason I did a live stream today is I had a bit of free time on my hands. Normally I'm at work. I've just got 2 days off. This morning when I did my Messi video, I had a full head of hair. I had a full head of hair like 3 hours ago. I just went to the barber shop, did some shopping, came back. Otherwise I'll be at work today, but I've got 2 days off. So I've got some paperwork to do, and I've got some flat organisation to do, which I've been putting off for a week. Yeah. Being lazy is not a good idea. So I've got a busy 24 hours ahead to get all this place tidied up. I've got some furniture arriving at some point. Fun. Which means I've got to reorganise the flat again. So it's all a bit of a mess, but I've got to get the flat tidy because I've got family coming over in a bit. But now, when it comes to being a moderator, I normally choose them. I see the live chat. I see who comments in the chat. If it's a regular viewer, week in, week out, who regularly also leaves comments in the comment section of videos, I'm more likely to make them a moderator. I don't like people asking me moderators. I bump them down the list. How is work going? Work has been mental. Work has been very interesting. We're short-staffed, standard. We're going through a reorganisation at the depot as well, which is not going down well with some. We've had high staff turnover, which surprises me during this pandemic. You would think people would want to keep their jobs. Apparently, some people want to get fired for being idiots. So we've got a high staff turnover, which isn't great. We've got another lad leaving to go to university next weekend. His last day is on the 5th, which is our bank holiday catch-up. All the work we can't do on bank holiday Monday. So we've got one guy leaving for good reason, because he's joining an engineering course at Loughborough, and he is going through officer training with the Royal Navy. So part of that is he wants to be an engineering officer. So part of that is an engineering course at Loughborough. He's been accepted, even with all the chaos that was the results fiasco. But work's busy. It's keeping us busy. It's not perfect. Obviously, it's been mental since before the lockdown. It's been crazy. Before the lockdown, it was getting mad. work solidly through. This is my first proper actual holiday. I was meant to go down to Dorset for a long weekend. Had to cancel that holiday. So to get a couple of days off just to recharge the batteries, yeah, I've got to do a bit of housework and a bit of organising things, but it's nice just to have 2 days away from the depot and away from the yard and all that and away from the bin routes. But it's just getting there. I can't complain. I mean, could get paid a little bit more, but I can't complain about work. All told, it is what it is. Very busy, always busy. But work is work, so I can't complain too much. I mean, I did see the aftermath of the forest fire up at Chobham Common, which I could see from my old house. That was mad. The day I had the flat viewing here, about I was going to say 3 weeks ago. Three weeks ago, I had the flat viewing here, and got out of the garage, got to the top of my road, and I looked down the hill. 10 miles away, I could see this big wall of smoke, and I went to the flat viewing and all that, and I obviously got the keys to the place a week later. But yeah, 10 miles from where the fire was, it burnt 160 acres, or how many hectares? 10 hectares went up in smoke. And as in the borough I work in, and I drove past it a week after. Like the fire service were up there for a week, and I drove past it, and you could smell it. A week later, after they put it out, you could smell the burn. We've had a lot of rain, obviously, since then. A lot of thunderstorms, a lot of strong storms coming in. But had the weather stayed as it was with those high temperatures, we could have seen it get out of hand. I mean, it jumped the railway, it burnt Wentworth Golf Course, Sunningdale Golf Course. So it was quite a blaze over quite a big area. And we just don't know. I mean, September could be really hot and dry as well. So we've got to see what the weather does going forward. But yeah, work's been busy. Busy, always busy. But it's nice. It's nice to have a day off. It's nice to have a day off and 2 days off and have a bit of time. And I get a long weekend this weekend, so I've got Monday off next week. So it's nice to have a bit of relaxation so I can focus on doing more YouTube stuff. I mean, might do a few bits and pieces to do with the channel over the next couple of days over the weekend. It all depends on what happens in sport, because I'll be watching the British Touring Cars on Sunday. It'll be nice to watch that all day. And yeah, it's nice just to relax and chill out a little bit. It's been a hectic few months, and it's nice just to get a few days to myself. I've got to sort my lunch out in a minute, actually, because it's 2:30. But no, it's just nice just to have a bit of time to look at things and assess things, and just go from there. On the sports side of things, I mean, yes, British ice hockey is in a mess. And we're going to start summing up now. I mean, British ice hockey, yeah, I mean, the situation is far worse than what I thought it was. I knew one or two rinks were having issues. I didn't know it was as bad as it was. Clearly, the sports finances are in deep trouble, and facilities that we can use, it's obviously not where it should be. On the Messi situation, Lionel Messi, it'll be interesting to see what can be decided about his contract. Is the clause still valid because the season ended 2 months later? Can he leave on a free? Will they enforce a transfer fee, which basically means it's impossible for him to move anywhere? Will that then go down the Bosman ruling? And the Bosman ruling, I'll have to look into that. And that's a real legal minefield as a Bosman ruling. It gets really messy. Excuse the pun. Rugby league side of things, hopefully an announcement will be made at Brisbane Broncos concerning a replacement head coach. They've got an interim coach for the next 5 games, but it'll be interesting to see who actually gets the job full time. There's other bits and pieces going on. F1 is what it is. I mean, NASCAR's obviously resumed. Semi-pro sports in a better position than pro sports. Yes and no. I think sport in general is at a crossroads, and I always said the money bubble in football will burst at some point. It was the coronavirus that did it. I cannot see how any team can justify spending the amount of money that they're asking for Messi. I can't see Neymar's transfer record getting broken anytime soon. As soon as Berry started to hit the wall, and that's a year ago, you had to think to yourself, the money bubble's got to have burst. It cannot continue. And what the last 5-6 months has shown us is the unsustainability of the current sporting model. It doesn't matter if you're in a sport that has promotion relegation, or if you're in a sport where there is no promotion relegation, it's a ring-fenced league. What we have seen is the unsustainability of sports finance and how reliant sport is on fans going to games locally. Even though sport is an international industry, fans going through the turnstiles, paying for tickets, putting bums on seats is far more vital than they care to admit. They were telling us that, they could let us in free. And yeah, while the TV deals were not being demanding rebates and games were played at the right time, according to Sky and BT, yeah, in theory, what we were told a couple of years ago was the Premier League could let us in for free or very low amount of money. What has actually transpired is that was clearly a lie, and they were cooking the books, and they weren't actually telling us the full facts of, actually, we're overpaying our players. We're not paying our non-playing staff enough. Yeah, it was the non-paying staff at clubs that got furloughed. It was the non-paying staff that lost their jobs. Whereas the players, most of whom are still earning a full salary without any deferral or wage cut. So the athletes themselves need to look themselves in the mirror and go, can I justify, do I actually need this much money? I mean, I always use Danny Rose as an example because he really is an idiot and he sets himself up for abuse. He goes, I can't live on 50 grand a week. I need 100. Okay. Danny Rose. 100 grand a week. That's £5.2 million before tax a year, which works out at £2.75 million after tax. Does anyone really need to earn that much money for kicking a ball and half the time not doing it very well, allegedly? I use Danny Rose as an example because he earns millions per year. He earns more a year than the Prime Minister. There has to be that point that when you're earning more money than the people governing this country, admittedly very badly, but if you're earning a higher salary per week or over a month than a Prime Minister does over an entire term as Prime Minister, yeah, you might want to learn some humility. And unfortunately, something like the Harry Maguire situation, it's more bad press. But at the moment, that's sort of been buried in the sports media because the Messi narrative, the football media at least, are obsessed with Lionel Messi, where he's going to end up. Harry Maguire is lucky that Messi wants to leave Barcelona. If Messi signs a 1-year extension, hypothetically, then Harry Maguire is having his a brand new sphincter inserted in him. He's been ripped a new one, as they say. He's lucky that Messi is the talking thing at the moment. Last couple of months has been Black Lives Matter, and Lewis Hamilton, and his demanding that people take the knee. And I'm just like, go away. Seriously, politics and sport should not mix. Unfortunately, that's the thing. But Harry Maguire is lucky that other sports stories are being pushed on the agenda right now, heavily pushed by various media outlets. So he's lucky he's sort of hidden away in the back pages of the newspapers and getting less airtime on websites and on YouTube and the 24 news outlets. Had that happened in a normal season, questions would be asked, because the normal season would have ended in June. Messi would have been allowed to leave on a free transfer. This has happened in August. Bang. It'd be a quiet, news cycle in July, early August, and then yes, that would have made much bigger news when it comes to football players in the off season. He's not the first player or sports star to get involved in an incident like this. I refer back to Ben Stokes. While Ben Stokes is a brilliant cricketer on the field, off the field he's an absolute arsehole. Plain and simple. He was very lucky over the amount of instances he's had off field to be in a leadership position with the England squad. Harry Maguire, again, it's a privilege, not a right to be there. Yes, sports stars are human, but a lot of them live in a bubble where they don't really understand the real world. We'll have to see what happens going forward. If he gets sanctioned by Manchester United, if he gets punished, he's been dropped from the England squad. That is telling. He's a key part of the England defence. Him being dropped is telling. I think Southgate's sending a message there. It'll be interesting what Manchester United do to sanction him. But he's not the first football player to get up no good. And he won't be the last. We've seen it with Danny Cipriani in rugby as well. He got involved in a similar scuffle in the Channel Islands in an off-season. And he's a player known to have issues with alcohol and legal infractions. There's been many around the world who have some colourful off-field antics, which don't help their cause. But Harry Maguire thing, we'll have to follow what happens with that if Manchester United sanction him for his holiday antics. But I think he's lucky in the sense that the press are salivating over Messi and his play future. Ben Stokes is just a general arsehole off the field. On the field, yeah, he's a brilliant player, but off the field, he's an absolute arse. There are some players who are very, very humble away from sport, who really do go out into the community without the photo shoots. Because what you find in professional contracts, they state they have to do charity work. Now, that wasn't always the case, but a lot of sports stars don't go around with the camera. The media following them when they do their charity, like, oh, we're opening up this hospital wing for disadvantaged kids, or we're helping with a homeless shelter, and with all the media there, a lot of them just go out about the communities that they play in quite calmly, quite quietly, under the radar, and they will do their charity work without an ego and get on with it. There are others, though, that make a big deal about it because it's a PR stunt, and I don't like that. The fact that it has to be written into players' contracts to actually do charity work shows you how, if it wasn't, they wouldn't. The attitude of the modern player. That's my opinion. I'm probably wrong, but that's my opinion on how the modern sportsman is. It's all a PR exercise. We seem to be, involved in the community. There are a lot in other sports where it isn't written in the contract, but they do volunteer their time in the off season. They do volunteer their time on their days off with local projects and local charities and volunteering. And there are others who, in the off season, actually take up regular jobs and do it incognito, and people don't even realise. But I think the football clubs have realised it's a PR exercise. Some of the players who are well advised realise it's a PR exercise, and they're selling their brand. But to me, that makes me feel uncomfortable. Using charity as a PR exercise, I don't like that. It's a trend to seem to be involved with the community and charity work. As it's trendy. No, it should actually be human decency to support your local charity or support those in need or those less fortunate by volunteering your time. You shouldn't do it because it's trendy. That's my opinion on that. On the Ben Stokes side of things, he's not the media darling, is he really? But I don't think he helps himself with what he's done off the field. Some of the incidents of misbehaviour, I think is the best way to describe it. And Harry Maguire risks going down the same line as so many other sports stars who've had off-field indiscretions that really do raise into question their moral fibre. Just because they're talented on the field or high profile on the field, off the field, a lot of them have come across as arrogant, entitled. Quite frankly, not well-behaved individuals, and it brings the sport to disrepute. And he's not the first football player. He won't be the last. And at this time during the pandemic and the crisis, it doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah, it is a form of hypocrisy. I I don't like it when they're shoving when they're shoving a camera in someone's face, showing their good deed. I'm doing well here. It's like, no, it shouldn't be some ego trip. It should actually be done out of decency. This is why I can't stand some celebrities who when they're doing their charity stuff, make sure the cameras are all there. It's wrong. You're taking advantage of those in need and vulnerable to further your image. It's wrong. Um, but it makes you wonder if they were doing it before they were famous or wealthy. And they probably weren't. Is the simple answer. They probably weren't. Anyway, I've been going for an hour and 10 minutes. I thought I'll keep this live stream short. I'm going to sort myself out some lunch and do a bit of tidying up. Thank you very much for watching. Obviously, I'll follow any of the sports headlines that break over the next few hours, and we'll see what happens with Messi and the negotiations with, is he going to be allowed to be leaving on free? Are they going to try and enforce a transfer fee? Will there be a Bosman ruling, which is a possibility? Let's not rule that out, and we'll go from there. But thank you very much for watching. Thanks for all your questions, and I will have some more videos upcoming for you very, very soon.